War should be a last resort. Don't vote a blank check to this administration. They are all too determined to have this war no matter what occurs.
Gentleman from Florida. Gentleman from Florida.
I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Weiner.
Thank you, sir. As we engage in this most patriotic debate, I am struck by how much we all seem to agree upon. We all seek to avoid using our troops and unleashing our military might unless we are forced to. The greatness of our nation is not measured in our muscle, but in our restraint. We are a nation of awesome power, but we don't use it to conquer other peoples, to expand our borders. We are rightly proud of our history of taking the first blow before we move to respond. On this, we all agree. We all seem to understand and support the imperative of operating in cooperation with international institutions and multilateral coalitions when tackling truly global challenges. It is moral leadership to act in concert with others, and it is smart politics. We prefer this path because it speaks to our respect for others, and we follow this path because it makes the road to our national goals that much smoother. On this, we all agree. We all agree that the regime in Iraq is a menace to the region and anathema to international law, not to mention a disgrace to our common humanity. Even the most fervent opponent of use of force does not contend that Saddam Hussein is not a tyrant. On this, we agree. Finally, we all agree that in some degree or another, preemption has to be part of our national defense. Perhaps this is more clear to those of us who once lived in the shadow of the World Trade Center, or those of us who attended a funeral for one of the fallen of September 11th, or those of us who looked into the eyes of a child whose parent was taken from them in the attacks. But we all agree if we could strike first to prevent the terror of 9/11, we all would have. We all would have. Preemption is not immoral. Permitting an attack that we can deter is immoral. On this, we agree. So how is it that we agree on so much yet differ on this resolution so starkly? Let me address 3 points I have heard today and commonly over the last weeks. First, I have heard those that oppose the resolution argue that there is no imminent threat, nothing dire enough for us to act immediately. First, let me concede that this debate should have taken place after the election. It could have taken place after election, and it would have been most appropriate for it to take place after the election. But I find it astounding that some suggest that because there is no smoking gun, we ought not act. To employ the same metaphor, we have a madman who hates us, gun and bullets in the same room. After hundreds of hours of hearings and thousands of pages of revelations about our failure to connect the dots on so many occasions, why is it now we hear this insistence on metaphysical certainty of the madman's intent before we act? Newsflash. What we don't know about his intent could fill a book. The same critics of our intelligence capability are now expecting perfect intelligence. Secondly, some have argued that Saddam has not been belligerent. In fact, he has. The UN resolutions that were passed as part of the ceasefire in 1991 were agreed to by the parties to ensure that Saddam would not be belligerent. He has violated every one. Is not the violation of anti-belligerence agreements itself a sign of belligerence? Finally, I have heard the argument that Saddam's capabilities are so degraded that he posed no threat to us or to his neighbors. I remind my colleagues that the cost of the entire September 11th attacks on our nation were less than that of a single tank. How much does it cost? How hard is it to strap nerve canisters to a terrorist posing as a tourist and have him walk into Times Square or into the National Archives? He doesn't need an ICBM to reach New York or Washington. Saddam Hussein just needs a chance. I will vote for the resolution, but I say to the President that I am voting for all of it. I am voting for the part that encourages that all diplomatic measures possible be taken, including a final round of inspections. Use of force as a last resort must truly be a last resort. And to my colleagues who seek disarmament and concession for Saddam, as do I would urge you to consider the need to demonstrate with no uncertainty that we mean business. The best way to avoid the use of force, I would argue, is to authorize the use of force. Cajoling, negotiating, strong language, harsh proclamations alone will not work against Saddam Hussein. Saddam Hussein must understand today that the jig is up. No more delay, no more obstruction. We will take your weapons either with your assent or without it. I yield back the balance of my time.